Hello YouTube, it's Audio Base Chris here with a video explaining how to install a net version of Debian on a PlayStation 3 running a custom firmware. This particular system is running a version of 3.55, the KMEAW, or whatever it's pronounced, and this allows you to run, obviously, modified binaries on your PS3. First of all, if you want to install Linux or Debian version of Linux, you need to get two things. You need to get the boot OS installer. I'll put a link up in the video description on where to get this from. And you also need the level 2 patcher. First thing you need to do is boot into the boot OS installer when it's installed. This now creates a boot config file and adds a few patches to the program level 2. This normally doesn't take more than about 30 seconds or so, and it only has to be done once. Okay, press X to exit. Now you need to run LV2 patcher. Those two items are the only things you need to install Linux. Scroll all the way to the bottom and select Linux, and then press X to boot it up. This will load a special version of the Linux kernel. There is currently a working Debian installation on this PS3, but I'm doing a reinstallation here, so this next screen will look slightly different to mine. As you can see, you have to first of all press the PS button on your controller at this screen and make sure it's plugged in via USB. As you can see, I have two options here. One is Debian and one is install Debian. When you first do this for the first time, it'll only have install Debian. So select that by pressing start on your joypad. This will then go onto the net and download a kernel. So you will need to make sure that you have your PS3 plugged into a router via the Ethernet cable. This won't work over Wi-Fi at the moment. This will now reboot into the low memory version of Debian. If you think, lots of people will probably be saying, well, I use Ubuntu, I'd like to use Ubuntu. Ubuntu is based on Debian, so all Ubuntu is Debian with a few tweaks and some recompiled packages. Okay, this is the graphical version of the non-graphical version of the installer. This is text-based. At this precise moment in time, it's asking for your language. Select whichever language you want using a USB keyboard, or you can use your joypad. Press the PS button again and you can use up and down to select it. You will need a keyboard plugged in at one point though, so if you haven't got a USB keyboard, go get one, or there is one other option which I will come to in a moment. So first of all, select English or whatever language you want. It'll ask what country you're in. This is so it can pick the packages that relate to your location and download them from a quicker server. So I'm in the United Kingdom, as you can tell. and I'm going to use the British English keyboard. This is the mirror of the Debian archive, so again United Kingdom, and you can pick one of the mirrors here. Generally speaking, the defaults are pretty much okay. If you have a proxy, enter it on this screen. If you don't, just hit enter. This will now connect to the internet and check the Debian archive mirror and start downloading the base system for Debian. This is the base system for the installation. The whole rest of this video will probably be watching progress bars scroll across the screen. So when it comes to the main installation, I'm going to start pausing the video at certain points and bringing it back in whenever it asks me a question to save messing about. Okay, this could take a little while, so I'm going to pause the video here for a moment and I'll be back in a second. Okay, we're back. Now, after that first section has been finished, then this next screen will pop up. Now, this next screen is relevant if you wish to continue your installation over the network via a SSH client. So, if for example you didn't have a USB keyboard, that's not the end of the world. You can still go ahead and install Linux using this. Now, to use this, what you'd have to do is get a PuTTY client, an SSH client such as PuTTY, connect to the PS3's IP address, which is on the screen, with the username installer and the password PS3. It never says the password on the screen, so PS3 is the password that connects to this. And then the remainder of this installation would appear on your PC using the client as opposed to on the PS3 itself. However, as I do have a USB keyboard plugged in, I'm just going to hit enter. Okay, at this point it's going to detect all the hardware in the system, grab anything that's relevant to that. Again, as I said, it's all progress bars going across the screen. One thing to note is that in a moment it will be starting up the partition manager. At this moment in time you can only install to an external hard disk, a USB external hard disk. I've got a 1TB Western Digital hooked into the PS3 at the moment. I've partitioned it into two parts. One is FAT32 and the other is XT3, I do believe. The FAT32 partition is to allow me to access whatever I download using like news groups or anything on the PS3, so I can download like TV shows or whatever and access them on the PS3 using the PS3 interface. Okay, now at this point, if you've just plugged in a USB hard disk and you want to use it, select guided use entire disk, as this is the partition setup. I'm however going to have to go into manual mode because mine's slightly differently set up. So I'm going to select my XT3 partition, select that, and I'm going to delete the partition. Okay, selecting guided partitioning, and I'm going to select guided use the largest continuous free space. That'll leave my FAT32 partition alone. All files in one partition, recommended for new users. You might as well. Now this is now going to partition the hard drives. Again, this is a very lengthy setup. It's going to ask you if you want to write the changes. Make sure that everything is as you want before you select yes. Otherwise you could be erasing important data. If you're just using normal USB disk and you're going to dedicate it to the PS3, that's fine as well, or a USB key. Just while it's starting to format the partitions, you're probably wondering what the whole point of having Linux on a PS3 is. Well, it's a very good low power system. It's not amazing for having a graphical user interface on. It won't run a full GNOME desktop or a KDE desktop particularly well, as it only has 256 meg of RAM available. And there is a bug with this particular installation using the Asbestos 2.01 installer and the kernel, where it can only see 108 megabytes of the PS3. So as for installing web browsers and things, it will work, but it'll be very, very slow. What I use this for is I use it as a file server, a web server, and I use it to download stuff off my news groups using all web-based tools. So I don't have to install any of the graphical user interface tweaks or anything on mine. Okay, I'm now going to pause the video here, as this will take a long time. Okay, we're back. It's taken us about an hour to get to this point. However, it could be faster for you or slower depending on the speed of your internet connection. On the screen it's asking me if I'm happy to do the Debian popularity content usage package survey. Completely up to you. It's anonymous, but I'm just going to select no. And again, more progress bars. Okay, here we go. At this point, it's asking what packages we want to install. As it stands, it will have the graphical desktop environment pre-installed. Now, I'm going to deselect that, as I don't need it, and I have no use for it. You, however, you might want to use that. That will, at the end of the installation, drop you into a proper nice GUI with mouse and keyboard and graphics and everything. I'm not going to bother with that. Web server, file server, and SSH server. They're all the ones I actually need. And then you tab out of that back to and select continue. Now at this point it will now go away and start installing the items you requested. As I haven't asked for a lot, this should be very quickly. If you've selected to install the graphical user interface, you'll have to download about another 500-600 megabyte of software and then unpack it, which is pretty slow on the PS3, so it should take a while. As you can see on my progress bar at the moment, it's downloaded quite a few files, but not as many as you would need for the graphical user interface. My system is very slow as well. Right, I'm going to pause this again until it asks me any more questions. Until that time, just imagine that the progress bar slowly walks across the screen. Okay, this next one probably won't apply to you, but it's just asking me a question about what name I want to give my Samba server. Those of you that don't know what Samba is, it's the Windows sharing doodly flop. So it allows you to connect to other computers on a network using the Windows default. The default is set to workgroup, so if you've already got a Windows network system and you want to network the PS3 into it, just leave it as workgroup and hit enter. Okay, it's now just installing the software that I asked it to download. This should only take a few seconds, so I won't bother pausing it for a moment or two just in case it pops up any more questions. It shouldn't do. A couple of good bits of software I use. If you like your torrents, I suggest downloading a program called transmission-daemon. That's DAEMON. You can get that from the apt repository using apt-get, as that will install a BitTorrent client that also is configurable by a web UI, a bit like uTorrent's web UI, but without the actual main program as well. And that's a very low memory, fairly low resource client. If you download news groups, I suggest a program called sabnzbd+, which you can get from the repositories the same way, apt-get sabnzbd+. That's plus as in the word, as opposed to the symbol. And that has an easy to use setup system as well. The PS3 is quite a good little silent server. You don't hear it very often at all. As if you have a fairly low noise hard disk enclosure as well with it, then you're laughing. I've actually used the PS3 to replace a little server I had sitting behind the TV. We're nearly done. One thing that will throw you if you've installed this for the first time is that at the end of the installation it throws up an error about no bootloader installing. Now that's completely fine, as this isn't a normal PC. We are very nearly there. Again, as I said, if you're installing the graphical user interface, this part will take a lot longer. Even though I'm on a slow network connection, it does have to unpack everything, and I think it'll take up about 3 GB of space. The graphical installation, at the moment with my installation, you're talking about 250 meg, 300, something like that. So bear that in mind if you want to install Linux on a USB stick. As an experiment, I did try and run a Minecraft server on the PS3. It will install. You can run Java and everything, but it didn't work well at all. This just doesn't have the memory to do an awful lot of heavy lifting. You could easily run a website off it, or a file server, FTP server. There is a kernel patch available that will give you access to, here we are, this is the error I was talking about. No bootloader has been installed, but that's fine. There's nothing you can do about that, so hit enter. As I was saying, you can add a patch to unlock the extra memory, but that introduced a couple more problems when you're getting a lot of connections that would make the PS3 kernel panic. So it's up to you. Although if you're not familiar with compiling or installing a new kernel, then that's a bad idea. Okay, this is normal. It'll now turn off, completely reboot. Should come back up as a normal, back into the PS3 system. Okay. Instantly, get this game, it's great. Right. You don't need the boot OS installer anymore. You can delete it or you can leave it on if you ever need to reinstall. Then all you need to do to load Linux back up is select LV2 Patcher again. Make sure your controller is plugged in via a USB cable, or make sure you've got a USB keyboard plugged in for the next bit. Okay. Select Linux again, as before. Now this time, once it boots into the blue screen, select the Debian entry on the screen. So we're not installing this time. You can either use your USB keyboard or you can press the PS button on your controller and use the D-pad to select Debian. This will now drop quite a bit on the screen. Ignore that. As far as I understand, it does a double boot kernel. It boots one kernel to load the other kernel, and that's what's just happened there. Now, as you can see, the penguins appeared at the top of the screen. it should boot into a nice little prompt. There we go. Debian login. Now, the default login for PS3 Linux is either PS3 or root. Now, you can either log in with the username PS3 and the password PS3, or if you want to log in as a root user, it's root and then PS3. I'm going to log in as root. PS3. Now, if you want to do this, the first thing I was just doing before you do anything else is to change your password. So type in PASWD, password. It'll ask you to enter your new password twice, and now your password's changed. Obviously, change your password the first thing you do, as everybody who installs a PS3 Linux will have access to your password otherwise. So there you go, that's basically it. If you decide to go for the graphical user interface, if you decide you want to add the graphical user interface afterwards, that's a simple apt-get install GNOME desktop. Or not, as the case may be. There is a command to enter, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. If you want a slightly lighter weight graphical user interface, apt-get install LXDE. Now, as you can see, there's a lot to install on that one. But I'm not actually going to go ahead with the installation, but that will give you all of the benefits of a nice GUI without having to bring your system to its knees. Just going to install my process monitoring software. And here we go. As you can see, 108 meg, of which 32 is being used, and I'm not using any of my swap. So yeah, not too bad. So I hope that's been informative. If you have any questions, please feel free to hit me up on the channel. I'll be happy to answer pretty much everything. One thing, a couple of questions I'll deal with right now. You cannot install Windows 7. There's no way in hell you'll ever be able to run Windows 7 on this system. Even if there was a PPC architecture version of Windows 7, this just doesn't have the memory to run it. Secondly, you can't run Wine either to run Windows applications, as there is no PPC port for Wine. The PS3 uses completely different processor architecture to a normal Intel or AMD based system. So anyway, apart from that, feel free to ask me anything. In the meantime, enjoy. You can do a lot with a very small graphical system like this, a non-graphical text-based system like this. I suggest you have a look at some of the server-based guides on Linux on the internet. If there's any interest, I will write up a tutorial on turning the PS3 into a small based downloading box. Anyway, that's been all your voice, Chris. Catch you later.